Hey everybody, welcome back to your Dawn of Drones podcast. By the way, soon to be Dawn of Autonomy in 2024, if you saw that come out this week. We are so excited to round out this year with the best of 2023, sponsored by Sage Tech Avionics. And with us today, we have Jake Lahmann. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
Lahmann?
you get exactly right, Don.
I remember you talking to Maggie in Clubhouse. You're saying, like law and man, lawman. Okay, got it. So Jake is from Valmont Industries, and I met Jake, gosh, a couple years ago. I'm going to say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it was Energy Drone and Robotics Coalition Summit, where you have such a huge presence there, walking around the floor and all the things you do, critical infrastructure. So we're going to get deep into that, but as we talk about you, Jake, and your background and Valmont's background, let's roll this film. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Don, and thanks for having me here. It's great to be here with you this morning. Yeah, I've been pretty lucky. I've been working with drones since 1999, developing imaging and connectivity payloads, primarily for the intelligence and defense markets, a lot of robotics companies in those fields as well. But in 2011, 2012 timeframe, when drones started becoming really popular, I switched gears a bit to developing entire UAS solutions, 3D modeling systems, and UAS training programs for public safety agencies all across the nation. And then 2018, I was recruited by Valmont to help formalize and start their UAS program, and since then just been tackling all kinds of big industry challenges out there.
Now we're seeing some things on the videos. We're talking here, Jake. We're seeing helicopters, we're seeing water drones, we're seeing a lot of towers. So tell us about Valmont.
Yeah. So Valmont, we've been around since 1946. So we're celebrating our 77th anniversary this year.
Wow.
We've started manufacturing infrastructure for the ag market with a pretty modest investment of $5,000. But since then we've grown to 11,000 people. We're in 100 countries around the world. Manufacturing infrastructure for utility, telecom, transportation, solar, et cetera.
And Valmont is global, so we're not just talking the United States, we're talking everywhere, right?
Yeah, that is correct. And to for the UAS services, we're primarily here in North America, but we have worked abroad as well. Our manufacturing is very prolific globally.
Incredible. We're seeing so many things in this video. We're going to get deeper into each one of these as we move forward. But Valmont decided to use drones at some point, and why is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's probably a natural course of things for Valmont. To bring into how Valmont works with its infrastructure customers. Imagine a transportation corridor or a utility corridor. There is an immense amount of planning that has to go into those types of scenarios. So, along with manufacturing the structures, Valmont is natively figuring out a lot of solutions for our customers because those corridors have to be there for decades to come.
Right.
And so it's a real natural progression, given what drones can do to answer a lot of questions for infrastructure, that Valmont would adopt it. But in 2017, to be specific, Don, we were doing an inspection project down in Texas on very large transmission towers. We were using very large cranes, 60, 90-ton cranes, to put our technicians aloft and inspect these structures to make sure they're A-OK. Big expense, 60, 90-ton cranes, many of them, as you imagine, a lot of safety issues, getting people at height, landowner disruptions, and you got to turn off those power lines to put people up there. So there's a loss of revenue for our utility customers. And somebody at Valmont said, hey, can we do that with drones? And obviously the answer is yes. And that's when I came on scene to do a lot of trials and testing. And we could absolutely do that structural inspection via drone. And as a result, Don, our risk profile changed significantly because we didn't have people up in that hazardous environment. Landowners super happy. So the environmental impact was greatly reduced. There's a big difference between a 90-ton crane and an F-250.
Right.
Customers very happy. They get to keep those big high voltage power lines on and keep their customers happy. So it was a big success, and we haven't looked back since.
Speaking of looking back, now I remember, Jake. I don't remember who introduced us, but I remember I was writing a white paper at the time for Iris Automation about the value proposition for drones in inspections, and someone said, you need to talk to this guy, Jake Lahmann from Valmont. He is the guy. And what stood out when I interviewed you for that, and I remember it specifically, was this idea of the cranes and the damage it does to the land, how heavy they are, getting them onto the property, not to mention, of course, as you said, the workers that have to be at height. I mean, in that video we just showed, we saw that guy, hanging from a basket, working on wires, and, that's just so dangerous. So incredible. And I know, just from your conversation with Maggie last week in Clubhouse, which, by the way, everybody, we know you're out there. This is live too, so drop some notes in the chat and ask Jake some questions. I know that it wasn't an easy journey to convince people. Even though someone had the great idea, let's use drones, actually getting from that idea to final operating capacity was what, at least a 1-year iteration for you?
Oh, yeah, easily a year. It's hard to keep track of the exact timeline, but roughly a year.
Yeah. Because can you explain what people's concerns are and how you allayed their fears?
Well, one of the biggest ones, Don, I think, as we first started, just in terms of the team and what we were doing, was training. It was pretty obvious to me, as we started entering into that environment, that the Part 107 cert, which we were just celebrating at the time for coming to be, just wasn't adequate enough. We needed more. We got guys operating in critical infrastructure environments, high voltage, which there is something we should probably talk about there with the But
so you're talking electromagnetic interference.
That's right.
And, we'll table that, but
and we're also trying to answer questions for critical infrastructure to make sure it's maintained, it operates safely. So it's a big deal, and we took it upon ourselves to get our folks, trained in a structured way. I took what I was doing in public safety with all those hundreds of agencies and we over to utility in this case, made some very specific SOPs, some very detailed flight plans, and we probably trained our guys for about a month before we would let them go solo, and that made them comfortable, it made the customer comfortable, pilots comfortable. It was all new at that time, and we've carried on with that, Don. We call it Ascend now for our structured training. It's a 207-hour program, 3 different stages that we put our pilots through, and not only train them, but we also certify them so that they have great knowledge and a competency to actually go perform those missions safely and be good stewards for our infrastructure customers out there.
Yeah, you use the term SOP or the acronym, and just for everybody out there, it's standard operating procedure. I'm sure many people know that, but some may not. You've done so many things along the way, Jake, in making this reality, and frankly, being a pioneer for these complex operations that are so important. I want to focus a little bit on, let's just say, the top three, right? This is the best of 2023. And there was an image, a brief image in that video. And I think we have a photo here. Let's pop it up of the water dragon. Tell us about this, because as I think about the best technology that's out there this year, and tell us about this drone, and you guys created this.
We did, yeah, from the ground up. The water dragon is one of those classic examples of some innovation born from just an impossible task. I told you those 60, 90-ton cranes.
Yep.
Don, we were so happy to see those cranes go away.
Right.
But as soon as they went away, it created another problem. Because keep in mind, we were inspecting the structures. And we had every detail about them. And, we're talking, really tall, 200-foot tall transmission towers. So birds like to congregate on those structures, and they
and leave their mark, shall we say?
Yes, that's a very gentle way of putting it. So we had, when we had the cranes, we could just put somewhere, scrub it off, and do our inspection. With them gone, we had to create something to clean that off, and that was the water dragon. What you're seeing there on the screen has an onboard and high pressure pump. We can go up a loft. It takes a little bit of a pilot and to clean that off. And so we solved that problem in working with utility customers. We also figured out that, hey, cleaning insulators, like the image there, is also important. A lot of contamination collects on those insulators. It can start a fire. It can erode the insulation. Everybody's just tickled about us as subscribers to enter, of course, the utility company, keeping the revenues going.
Well, so not only are you using the water dragon to assist in inspections and kind of cleaning the area, but also from a prevention and kind of maintenance standpoint, you're using it to, wow, that's unbelievable. It's first of all, I love the name, super cool. Great technology that you guys created. I want to talk about Ascend, your training program, because Jake, as we both know, there's a lot of training programs out there. A lot of them are just, hey, how to get your Part 107 license if you're in the U.S., the very basics. In fact, as we also know, you don't need any hands-on training to actually obtain that license.
Right.
But for operations like this, as you said, whether it's with the water dragon that has very specific, probably, flight profile that you know how to handle, or just flying around critical infrastructure in general, which is risky. And I want to talk about that EMI thing you brought up, so I'm not forgetting. Tell us about Ascend. You said it's a program you created. Tell us a little bit about it and whether anybody can attend it and how they do that.
So it is open for organizations to attend to. If they want to start their own drone program, they can come through Ascend. We can set up a time and place for them to go through it. But to give you a high-level overview of it, we can take people wherever they're at in experience, given the different levels. There is even early level to things to where we will get people ready for their Part 107 test. We call it pre-flight. And it one thing that's a little bit about it, we don't teach memorization for the test. We want people to really understand the concepts that FAA wants people to know about navigating the different airspace and different scenarios. And everybody that's gone through that, I think we're like 99.7 pass rate. Really good because they understand the concepts.
Wow. Did you say 99.7?
It's somewhere in that neck of the woods. Yes, it's really
God.
high. It was 100% for the longest time, but yeah, it's a really.
There's always one, Jake. There's always one. Yeah.
So once we get them legal, we then start bring them in what we call level one, and my way of just describing level one is getting people to a level to where what people would expect of a pilot. So they not only understand the laws, but they also understand how to operate drones safely in just basic environments. They understand the software, they understand basic maintenance, etc. And then level two, that's where it gets really interesting, Don. That's where we get people far and actually perform the task. And at the very end of that, the last day of the training,
right,
they have to demonstrate that they can actually do it. And that's where I'm going to brag about. Not everybody passes.
Yeah.
We have very strict standards because it is critical infrastructure. Only about 80% of the folks pass that course.
Okay.
But if they do, it denotes that they've gone through rigor. EV loss, flying the water dragon, performing more complicated missions like LiDAR data collection, etc.
Well, do you get the cool shades and the bomber jacket if you get that Top Gun level,
Not standard issue, but if somebody wants to come decked out like that, we will welcome them right in.
Very nice, very nice. I love it. Well, you guys have really made some interesting milestones over the past year in terms of distance and all kinds of things. Do you want to brag a little bit about your best of 2023 at Valmont?
Yeah, you bet, Don. So, record, we've done a lot of research, and we in that huge like right there, and that's your
wow. 77 miles we're talking about.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. We flew 77 miles over infrastructure. We really wanted to prove to us in the industry, drones are a very reasonable alternative to manned aviation. For the past 10 years, a lot of industries have looked at us in the drone industry, and they've been fascinated with our resolution on our cameras, but they really have it seriously because we make those little half-mile hops down the area infrastructure.
Right.
That changes the game, and 77 miles nonstop. We landed our purpose at 77 miles to denote our anniversary this year of 77 years.
Oh, that's so cute. I love that. Yeah.
And when we landed, we had over half a tank of gas left, so we could have easily doubled that and going further.
Oh my gosh! All right, so gas powered, and are you guys developing this drone as well? Because you created the Water Dragon from the ground up. This gas powered one, is this yours, or you have an OEM that you work with?
So there's some customization to it, Don, and we have units showing up here pretty soon, and we're really spending our attention is on the payload.
Yeah, no doubt.
We're doing a lot of development work in concert with T-Mobile and Sony
Mm-hmm.
We have a very custom payload on there. It's a total of 3 very high-end cameras, along with AI. So as that drone is flying, it is automatically recognizing the infrastructure, taking the correct image, framing it up, nice and beautiful, consistency every time, and then it's backhauling, so we do near real-time inspections, and that is all rolling up to is truly, making our stake in the ground that we can provide alternative to mitigation. And in the case of utilities, what they get in exchange for that is number one, safety. If the drone crashes, we just call the insurance company. It's
Right.
not that big a deal. But because it's a drone, very numerous, we're flying low altitude, we fly slower. The imagery is, it's a part of your product. We're a quarter gallon of gas per hour versus sometimes your helicopter. So
Whoa.
big difference on the environmental impact.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we can get that data back in near real time. So if there is some kind of issue on the infrastructure, we can question very quickly, and so the utility can get those addressed. And so it is, we believe, the first making not only more efficient than helicopters, but offer a tremendously better product utility customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's viewers out there. We see you guys jumping in. So please jump in the chat. We are live. If you've got questions for Jake, this guy was really the pioneer, especially in critical infrastructure inspections. He's been in public safety. He's been in the military. I mean, such a stellar background. This is the guy you want to ask questions of. So make sure you do. So we talked about the hardware. We talked some about the training. I want to talk about the software, Jake, because as you know, this all comes together, as you said, remotely to those engineers or whoever, critical infrastructure owners that want to be seeing the data sometimes as it's collected in real time, with that level of fidelity that you're talking about. So what is your interface with that? I saw that in the video that you showed earlier.
Yeah, good question, Don. So that's really fundamental to our team.
Yeah.
Like a lot of other teams, we gather beautiful data. There's so many teams that do that. Where we're a little bit different. We have a lot of inspectors, engineers, non-destructive technicians, linemen on our team. So they're taking all that, consuming that. We've built a platform in-house called PowerShift. We hired a development team a couple of years ago to harness all that, to bring it in, whether it's AI or the inspectors doing the manual analysis, really, grading it, the data by industry standard, whatever applicable standard that's out there, and then prioritizing each case. So in net, when we deliver that package to the customer, we give them a dashboard. They can see where all their problems are at, like graphically and on a nice little health chart, and everything's prioritized. So if there is a problem, they can get to the most important one first.
Okay.
As you know, Don, inflation is hitting everybody hard, including infrastructure customers. So those O&M dollars, those operation and maintenance dollars, they're very fleeting. Now they got inflation, so we have to manage those budget dollars to the best way possible.
Well, I wish I had Jake, I feel really bad because somebody called me. People call me all the time, or they'll email me and say, "Hey, do you know someone that does X?" And the question was, who do you know that has really robust AI that uses it for inspections? And in this case, it wasn't critical infrastructure. It might have been like a structure, just a structure on a building.
Right. Yep.
And over time to see those changes using AI. And honestly, I couldn't think of anybody, but I might hook you up after the show because if there's still a need out there, I want to introduce you guys. I think that's really important. That's great because everybody's talking about AI, right? It's like it's the buzzword of the day, and,
Yeah.
and people talk about how AI is on board the drone, and that's being used a lot of cases for things like collision avoidance and
Yeah.
whatnot. But to also have it in the software on the back end for the analytics and that data, I think is really
Yeah.
critical, especially when we're talking about infrastructure and targeting what needs to be fixed and what may not,
Yeah.
or hey, we need some preventive efforts over here to make sure this thing doesn't degrade further anytime soon. So
That's
pretty, yeah,
absolutely. I appreciate that, Don. And for the infrastructure customers, all of us as consumers, we're asking a lot of infrastructure. So they're under a lot of pressure
yeah,
to deliver that high quality of service, reliability, and then of course they have compliance that they got to abide by with the government, and so it really helps them get what they need to get very quickly to make some really critical decisions.
well, and I don't know that most people appreciate that, depending on the statistics you're looking at, anywhere between 70 to 90% of critical infrastructure in the United States is owned by private companies, private,
Hmm.
yeah, not the government.
Right.
And, it's kind of a surprising statistic when you think about that.
Hmm.
And so really key that you're able to support them, and Valmont is so critical in that. Let's talk about that a little bit more, because I was surprised too when I heard you tell Maggie that, hey, all those was it the traffic light poles?
Hmm.
You said if you see one in your neighborhood, it's probably a Valmont pole. Like, I never
Hmm.
would have thought of that, and I just do that math, and it's just like,
Yeah.
holy shnikes, that's
Yeah.
just in one neighborhood.
Yeah.
But that's some of the critical infrastructure that you guys support as well, right?
That is correct. And to put a finer point on that, Don, experience or driving down any given highway here in the U.S., see a utility pole, a telecom pole, that sign structure, the light pole that you mentioned, it's better than half that's a Valmont structure, and we touch a lot of lives here. Your last one, we do provide inspection services for any kind of infrastructure.
So people can actually hire Valmont folks to go out and inspect their stuff. So, because we had talked earlier, Jake, about the really robust training program you have, Ascend, where you
Yeah.
train companies to have their program pilots certified essentially
Hmm.
to do this work, but you also additionally provide the service as well.
Yes. Yeah, that is correct. So when we go to our infrastructure customers, we look to fill gaps. Some infrastructure customers already have their drone team, but may not have the long range capabilities, and so we'll fill in the gap there. When we go to those customers, and we really look at the life cycle of the infrastructure. And sometimes we can fill gaps even on the very front end before the infrastructure even exists. We can go up, scan the topography, give them a very nice LiDAR model so they can do all the design work. Valmont engineers can help with that as well. And then once it's built, after construction, somebody's got to make sure it was built right. And
Yeah.
we can help with that. And in the case of utilities, we can even tell them how much energy they can pass through those transmission lines safely, and also be compliant with government. And then, of course, there is the inspection piece, and that is just making sure everything a-okay on time. And at the very end of that life cycle, when the structure has done its job, as Valmont, we can help them out there too, and provide them new infrastructure that'll last even longer and better over time.
Well, talk about soup to nuts and everything in between. So, a lot of these operations you're doing, Jake, with the drones, require special permissions, waivers, for example. I mean, we're talking 77 miles beyond visual line of sight. That is extremely significant. But you were involved this year with a milestone, best of 2023 standard approval. Tell us about that one. I believe it was with Nate.
Yes.
Can you tell everybody what that is?
You bet. So a little bit about Nate first. Nate is one of the major telecom associations out there, and very closely related to that is TIA. And TIA is Telecom Industry Association, one of the standard bodies, and they work collaboratively together quite often. And where I got involved with them a few years ago, Don, like probably everybody else here in the call, saw the natural fit in between drones and telecom. I mean, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Be able to fly the drone, inspect that comm tower. But the telecom industry, those two organizations, they weren't quite sure about drones. And there was two aspects to where they had some reservations. One was the safety, and one was whether or not drones could even do the inspections accurately.
Yeah.
And I heard this very quickly when I joined the associations, and I took their concerns, to heart. In concert with Nate, we went and erected an entire telecom tower at one of our Valmont test facilities in Omaha, and we crashed drones into that tower on purpose.
My God. I assume your FSDO or FAA rep was standing right by your side as you're doing that.
Don, we had all the stakeholders there. We had FAA, FCC, all the major carriers, et cetera. Insurance underwriter companies were there.
Yeah.
And we crashed a number of drones over the past 2 years. To really answer that concern, every vulnerable part, and keep in mind on telecom towers, they're worried about all those thousands of dollars of radios, cables, antennas, and of course reliability for their customers.
Of course, yeah.
So we hit all those vulnerable spots, and in net, we did visual testing. We measured the impact, all the kinetic forces. Drones were proven very safe for telecom. Basically equivalent.
And you were purposefully crashing drones into them.
You
know what? You
need
to send Jake, you need to send that report to DHS, because I know this is something they're freaking out about. But just to show, like, hey, we actually crashed drones right into these things, and they were pretty resilient.
Yes.
So that would be a good news story for them. Yeah, Homeland Security.
Yeah, definitely. Well, along with the crash study, and it was a wonderful opportunity. You never get to crash drones on purpose.
Yeah, no doubt.
We did some inspection studies as well, to show that drones are a viable solution for inspection. And as a result, there was a lot of discussion in the background with several committees, with Nate and TIA. But this October, the new industry standards for inspection and maintenance and engineering for telecom have been changed to include drones in the standards. So now, and it wasn't before, now it is allowable to use drones inside telecom. And so, that of course is going to benefit Valmont, but it's going to benefit everybody in the drone industry. So
yeah, I mean, it normalizes it.
Yeah,
it normalizes it, like, hey, this is an official, valid way to conduct this inspection.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, congratulations, because I know that you were a big part in making that standard happen. I mean, that is huge news, like you said, for everybody. So that's for 2023. That's why you're here. Yep. Amazing. Before we talk a little bit more about what's next for you guys, Jake, I do have one question about the software I failed to ask. I want to address that. Yeah. Oh, and we wanted to talk about EMI
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So let me ask the software question, then we'll get to EMI just as cleanup, and
Sure.
then we'll talk about the future. On the software, you guys created PowerShift. Is
Yep.
it something that you can license to other folks that they can use as well since you created it, or do you
Yeah.
sell it? How does that work?
In the future, that will be the case. We will make
Okay.
it available for folks to use in our own program. But where people can use it at today, for those infrastructure customers, they're able to consume all of the raw data if they want through PowerShift. But what they really, of course, like is the dashboards and all the reports, so they can make their decisions as executives in the infrastructure world. But
Okay.
that comes just as part of our service to folks.
All right, awesome. And in the future, licensure possibly to others so they can benefit from as well.
Yep.
You mentioned EMI. So there's this new
Mm-hmm.
standard that says you can use drones for telecoms, but not only telecoms, but some of these other aspects of critical infrastructure give off electric magnetic pulses,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't know if I'm using
Yep.
the right word there, Jake, that could impact a drone's operation and
Yep.
frequencies. Tell us about how you kind of address that in these
Mm-hmm.
operations, because I would think that was significant in
Yep.
finalizing the standard and also just in
Mm-hmm.
daily operations.
Yeah, and it's something that my team has dealt with since day one. Going back that very first inspection out in Texas,
Yeah.
at the time,
Wow. Yeah.
um, that could operate in that environment really safely.
Mhm.
Around there, per our testing, pilots very quickly would lose control. That it would just overwhelm all the navigation systems, control systems.
Yikes.
So we worked with our manufacturers at the time, and it was two for right shielding in the aircraft, but also the algorithms to negate some of the natural interference that's going to occur. And we were successful, obviously. We were able to do our jobs. And as a result of that, nearly any drone that you pick up is can trace back to that one event. Most of the drones that use the shelf are going to have that shielding and algorithm, so all of us on the call can operate more safely in the environment. And I say more safely because it's still not perfect, and that's where the
Right.
training comes in very importantly. Stay on telecom, for example, we train our pilots for when they are going to get clearance.
Yeah.
Absolutely happen, and we don't want to get surprised by that. So we actually induce that in training, and they can get surprised in a safe environment and know how to mitigate the issue. And for those on the call for telecom, a quick tip is to make sure that you're not setting your drone to hover whenever it loses connection, because this is going to stay in that environment until it loses battery power and it comes out.
Yeah, I think we saw that happen in the news over water with a particular group. And, of course, it's kind of not a big deal,
Mm-hmm.
but of course the media made it a big deal.
Yeah.
So anytime there's an incident with a drone, especially if they're doing like, hey, this is the first time ever for these kind of operations, you're gonna
Yeah.
have the microscope on you. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that training is key to like not put it in hover mode, make sure it's going to land somewhere,
Yep.
return to home or something, RTH or something.
Yep.
So all right, we are getting short on time, Jake, as I knew we would, because there's so much to talk about. We talked about your drones. And by the way, can people buy the Water Dragon, or is that something you guys just kind of keep within house? Because that thing is
Yeah.
cool.
Well, no, they can't buy the Water Dragon. They have to buy us, Don.
They have to buy you. Okay, got it. All right. I was
Sign us
curious
up.
about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sign us up. We'll go out there and do some work for folks.
Okay, so the hardware, the training, the software, all of it, the standards, the record-breaking milestone, 77-mile flights this year. So what, Jake, is on tap for 2024?
Yeah. I'd say the biggest thing for us, Don, it is really diving in deeper on some of the engineering workflows. I gave you a quick little preview about some of the life cycle of infrastructure. There is so much activity that occurs through the design of those corridors, and then after the construction is done to make sure it was built right. And there's a ton of work my team is working on to smooth out those engineering workflows to make their life easier. And
Wow.
also, we're Valmont. We're in a very unique position of manufacturing that infrastructure and bringing those services and the hardware solutions together to just make infrastructure designs more precise, make construction faster, and make it better for every one of us here on the call.
Yeah, absolutely. We keep talking about critical infrastructure and infrastructure in general, Jake. Are you guys a part of the current, the future drone and advanced air mobility infrastructure that will need to be built?
Um, there has been some work there with Valmont, and I have some conversations going to get involved on a deeper level on that. It's interesting where the future is going to take us. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next 20 years. It's going to be amazing.
It is going to be amazing. And so between now and then, when or where might we find you, Jake? Lots of shows coming up
Yeah,
next year. I know I'm heading to CES
yep,
in January. So excited to see all that
yeah,
technology and the announcements that are going to happen in the beginning of the new year. How
yeah.
about you?
Well, Don, I think I follow you to all of those shows.
I think you do
So
because I see you all the time.
yeah, yeah. So CES, AUVSI, commercial UAV, EDR,
Yeah, energy
energy
drone. Yeah.
drone robotic. Yep. Be down there for certain, and then of course a lot of the industry shows for the infrastructure markets. Frequent flyer at those, but one that I would love to invite folks to attend and get involved with. I mentioned those drone crashes
Yeah.
and the inspection studies. We're going to continue with that because technology evolving, and we're going to add in more studies and expand the industries. We're going to include the utility this year. It's going to be in September in Omaha, and that's through NATE, the organization NATE. They can go to natehome.org and become a member of NATE and take part in some of the studies. Um, and we're going to dive into even some of the ground aspects of ground robotics as well, and live studies that people can actually participate in. I think it makes things very different. It's not just that you would go to; they can dive in and help solve problems for the industry.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And we mentioned NATE a couple times. What does that acronym stand for again?
So they're associated a little bit different, but what the acronym stands for is National Association of Directors.
Okay. Yeah, man, there's an association for everything and it gets super
Yeah,
nuanced, right?
yeah,
So that's cool. I mean, you live and breathe in that world. So
yeah,
you heard it here, guys. Next September, in the middle of the drone conference season, if
yeah.
you're in this space of critical infrastructure inspection, you may want to check out Jake and the crew at NATE in Omaha. So 1 minute left. I'm going to cede the floor to you, Jake, to make any concluding remarks and certainly please end with how people can reach you.
Yep. Well, Don and everybody listening, it's great to be here this morning. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, you can find me on LinkedIn, or if you want to email me, jake.lahmann@valmont.com. I'd love to hear from you. Anything that's resonated, if you'd like to join our team, pop me, maybe we have something for you. And then maybe if there's partnerships, if there's a way that maybe you can help out Valmont with you.
Well, awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Jake. Happy holidays upcoming. Definitely going to see you at CES in Vegas in the new year. And everybody out there, thank you so much. We are out here.